Hey friend, I'm happy to see you today. If you're new here, I'm Tara, your go-to personal growth coach, helping you stay balanced and badass so that how was your day doesn't trigger a complete meltdown. On this channel, I'm teaching strategies for managing it all, for laughing through the craziness, for balancing work and life like the true badass you are. So if any of that sounds like something you're into, or if it resonates with you, then I'd really appreciate it if you'd hit subscribe so you never miss out on any future content. So today, you and I are going to talk about the early signs of burnout. I remember about 6 months ago, the company that I was working for was going through a round of layoffs. And actually, they had several rounds of layoffs. And while my position was safe and I still was working and I still had a job, it still felt like the world was kind of crumbling all around me. Like it didn't matter how much sleep I got the night before, I was still completely drained of any kind of energy. There was literally no amount of caffeine in the entire world that was going to keep me awake or keep me energized. And when I'd log in, I'd have this just sense of dread, but also this really lack of clarity or lack of motivation to do much. I was still doing my job and I was still doing it fine, but the internal drive just wasn't there anymore. It really just felt blah every time I logged into work. There's no other way to describe it. Like people would ask, "How are you doing?" And I'd be like, "Meh," or blah. Like those are how I would describe my day. Not exactly what I wanted for my career. And boy, was I a monster at home. My poor husband took the brunt of the irritability and frustration and emotional toll that was going on in my entire body. He would ask me about my day, and it was like the claws came out or the tears came out. He never knew which version of Tara he was going to get, and it felt like he was having to tiptoe around me just because of my different mood swings. And I just knew that something wasn't right. Like deep down, I knew that this wasn't me. I hadn't had this kind of reaction before. And I knew that it just wasn't your typical stress, right? It wasn't your typical level of stress. And so that's what you and I are going to talk about today. We're going to talk about burnout and how to start to recognize those signs that you may be teetering on the edge of burnout so that you don't jump into the deep end. So let's talk a little bit about burnout overall first. Like, what is it? Burnout's not really just being tired, although that is a part of it. It's not just about being stressed, it's really about having that chronic feeling of exhaustion, fatigue, anxiety, almost like your body's just tense like 24/7. Burnout is really a chronic state physically and mentally of exhaustion to the point where you can't function normally. So let's kind of break that down a little bit because I think that breaking it down will help clarify first, like how to start recognizing burnout. So if you take that first piece, it's chronic. Chronic means ongoing and persistent. It's a long-lasting condition that doesn't go away. It's not something temporary. It feels a little bit more permanent. So like resting over the weekend or taking a vacation doesn't get rid of that constant persistence. Then you have the physical exhaustion piece. This is where no amount of sleep or rest is diminishing or lessening that feeling of drainage. Not drainage, but like that feeling of being exhausted and being tired. You can't get the rest that you need. It's almost also like you can't function throughout your day. Like the simplest tasks that you used to be able to do, it's like a chore to be able to go through the tasks. It could be something like you're feeling like you're almost walking through quicksand or through concrete, or like you're a sloth just going slowly through the motions of life. And then you have the emotional exhaustion piece too. And this is where you have brain drain, or we often call it brain fog. You're not thinking as quickly as you typically do. It's taking you longer to process conversations or just general information. There's also that feeling of numbness where things that used to bring you joy just aren't doing the trick anymore, or you can't concentrate on things like even just watching TV or reading a book because your brain is just tapped out. It's done and it has put all of its energy really into the burnout. And then the last piece of the definition of burnout is that effective functioning. So when you're in burnout, you're not able to function like you normally would. So all of these other things like the physical exhaustion, the mental exhaustion are causing delays in your responses. It's causing you to perform at a lower level, both at work and at home. Um, like I said earlier, those simple tasks that you used to be able to do are challenging to you now. And people start to notice that there's a difference in your behaviors, there's a difference in your performance overall. And many people think that burnout is just about like your schedule or your workload, but it's really about how the stress is impacting your physical and mental well-being. And it's important to recognize too that burnout builds up over time. It just doesn't happen overnight. That's the chronic piece of it, is that it's gradually building up inside your body. And so that's why it's important to recognize the early signs so that you can hopefully stop it in its tracks before it gets too heavy of a weight on your shoulders. So now that we know what burnout is and we've kind of broken it down a little bit more, let's get into those signs of what like early signs of burnout. The first sign is that chronic fatigue. And this goes beyond your typical like tired feeling. And I've mentioned this earlier. It's like no amount of sleep or rest is alleviating that fatigue that you're feeling. It's not just about being sleepy, it's actually about feeling like you're carrying a weight on your body and it won't let up. So you're drained, you're zapped of all energy, and you're like fighting for your life to keep your eyes open. So if you find yourself like dragging throughout the day or nodding off during meetings, or maybe you just can't focus, or you find that you're having to get up and go grab another cup of coffee on a more consistent basis than typical, that may be a sign that you need to be paying attention to. So try integrating some breaks into your work where you get up and get moving, because that movement does help lessen some of that tiredness and that fatigue. Also, make sure that you're getting quality sleep. Make sure that you're following a solid and healthy kind of bedtime routine, that you have some good sleep hygiene going on so that way you can get a solid night's sleep. Um, Always remember that the recommendation is to get 7 to 8 hours, and that includes, you know, that's really just when you fall asleep to when you wake up. You also have to have some wind down time in there as well. So just kind of keep that in mind and make sure that you're having a consistent sleep schedule as well. Bouncing back and forth from day to day on what your sleep schedule looks like is really not doing your body any favors in the process of burnout or in life in general. And regular exercise and a healthy diet can also help with your energy levels, which will help battle that fatigue because you're making sure that you're fueling your body in the right way. And the next sign is that your performance is starting to tank a little. You're noticing that things that used to come naturally or easily to you are feeling a little bit more laborious or taking a little bit more energy to complete, or you're taking a lot longer to complete some simple tasks that you might have been able to complete pretty quickly in the past. So if your productivity is slipping or you're finding that you're making more mistakes with your work, that's probably a red flag. You might also notice that you're not feeling as much motivation or excitement about things that used to bring you that motivation and excitement at work. It may feel like work is a little bit more of a drag than something that you look forward to. That could also be a sign of burnout in this process. And this doesn't just have to fit with like work tasks, it can also be at home as well. If things that like chores or activities at home that used to excite you and get you kind of pumped up or re energized aren't doing the trick anymore, or for me, like laundry, when I start kind of slacking off with the laundry, meaning like I'm not going through the whole process of the laundry and putting it away. If I find that I'm leaving or forgetting things in the washer or forgetting things in the dryer, then that's probably a sign that I might be teetering on burnout because my brain's just not firing on all cylinders. So when you notice that this is happening, first thing is that's an easy thing to do to combat this is to break things down into smaller tasks, things that are a little bit more manageable. And if you have to break these down into the teeniest, tiniest tasks to make you feel like you're getting things done, do that because that's going to help build that momentum to help you kind of get out of this burnout cycle. Another thing too is to celebrate your wins and your accomplishments and really be intentional about recognizing and reflecting on everything that you accomplish every single day because that will also build up that resilience to battle the burnout when it starts to sink in and kind of get its claws into you a little bit deeper because the motivation comes from action. Motivation really relies on momentum and activity. And so you want to make sure that you don't fall into the trap of not doing something and being stagnant because that's going to make the burnout feel even stronger within kind of your mental and physical health. Third is emotional detachment. We've talked about this a little bit earlier. This is that feeling of just generally feeling blah or like meh. Like you're not feeling connected socially at work or connected to your family or friends like you used to, or activities that you used to enjoy are just not sparking anything inside you. It's basically like dull. Like your life could just be described as feeling dull and boring and really just not having any kind of emotion attached to it at all. It's almost like you have separated from your body and you're kind of just going through the motions and watching your body play out the experience of your life. So when this happens, try to reconnect with things that do bring you joy and bring you some excitement. Maybe that's an old hobby that you want to get back into. For me, anytime I'm going through this, I like to try to get back into dancing because that's something that always makes me happy and it's something that I can easily do pretty much anywhere, especially now with like YouTube videos and all that stuff. And it's helping me kind of reconnect and center myself to who I am and what makes me happy and joyful. For you, it may be reading. It may also be watching some TED Talks or listening to some podcasts that inspire you and get you excited about something. What you want to do is find something that's going to spark some excitement, some emotion in some way. So that way you start to feel again in your life rather than just kind of watching your body go through the motions. Now, this next sign is a huge one for me, and that is when you start to notice that you're a little bit more irritable, or maybe snapping a little bit easier, or you just have generally more kind of emotionally charged reactions to things that normally wouldn't kind of set you off the edge. So, if you're at home and you're noticing that you're starting to snap at your partner, or you're snapping at your colleagues at work, or the tiniest of kind of mishaps. Like, let's say you drop a piece of paper and all of a sudden you're in a complete meltdown in tears because you dropped that piece of paper and you're spiraling out of control, saying nothing ever goes right. I'm a complete failure, yada, yada, yada. That is definitely a red flag and a huge, huge sign for burnout. So it's so important here to be sure to communicate with your loved ones and your colleagues about everything that you're going through, which does require some vulnerability, but it's so important because it helps them to understand where these reactions are coming from. So that way, hopefully, they can interpret them in a little bit more positive light and avoid the more kind of relationship strain that you may experience by having these emotionally charged reactions. It's also important to apologize whenever you do react a certain way that may have hurt someone. Just taking ownership over that will also help you kind of gain control back over of the situation. And also practice mindfulness techniques or any kind of self-care techniques or stress management techniques that will help you kind of manage your emotions. Emotional intelligence is so important, but so are the strategies to help you recognize when you're in that emotional mess and turmoil and how to regulate your body to get out of that. So that may be deep breathing techniques, it may be meditation, it may be exercise, whatever. You may have to try a bunch of different things to see what works for you, but try to gain control over those emotions because once you gain control over your emotions, you have started to gain control over the burnout. I personally like to use the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding exercise in moments of like major emotional turmoil. This also helps me with anxiety because it does center me and kind of puts me in the moment. And what this is you name out loud, you just take a few minutes, name out loud 5 things that you see, 4 things that you feel, 3 things that you hear, 2 things that you smell, and 1 thing that you taste. By doing that, you are putting yourself center in the moment and getting yourself out of kind of the tornado of emotion. So, the last thing that we're going to talk about as a sign of burnout is procrastination. And this is where you are avoiding doing something or you just aren't feeling the motivation to get started, or you're finding every distraction that you can do so that way you don't have to do the thing that you actually have to do. If you're not typically a person who procrastinates, this may be a very large sign that you are feeling burnt out or you're at least teetering on the edge of that burnout. And this is only going to cause more burnout and more stress because you end up either avoiding or just generally not doing the tasks that you need to do, which then build up. So you start having more tasks and more things on your to do list that you're procrastinating on and avoiding, which then adds more stress to your body and to your brain, which then starts to push you closer and closer to burnout. So that's it's an endless cycle, or it can be if you don't recognize it early and kind of stop it in its tracks. This is where breaking down your tasks can be super helpful into those small, manageable steps because it gives you kind of an action plan on what to do. And sometimes it just takes doing that one thing to help break the cycle of the procrastination. I also really like Mel Robbins has the 5-second rule. And this is where she tells you if you find yourself avoiding doing something or you catch yourself procrastinating on something, you give yourself 5 seconds. You count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. When you hit 1, you have to do something and make progress on that thing to get you out of the funk and to get you out of the procrastination cycle. You can also create a structured schedule or time block on your schedule and calendar to give yourself some structure to move forward and to do some of these activities or to do some of the small tasks, the smaller pieces that will get you towards your ultimate to do item. There's all kinds of tools that you can use too as reminders. And don't forget too to rely on others for accountability. That's also going to be helpful. Or if you need help in doing something, collaborate with other people. Rely on the support network that you have around you to help you get out of that procrastination cycle. Today, we talked about the early signs of burnout, what to do if you're kind of recognizing them in your life, and why this all matters to you in the first place. And if you are finding that you're at this point in the video and you're like, well, crap, I definitely am experiencing 1, 2, or all of these signs, then as your friend, I encourage you to talk to someone. Get the support that you need to help you process through this burnout. And I can be that someone. You can schedule your free 30-minute coaching session with me. I'll have the link in the description below. Listen, if you got something out of our chat today, hit that like button, subscribe for more content, and share this video with a friend. I know I'd appreciate it, and I'm sure they would too. And with that, I want to thank you for being here today and to remind you to stay balanced, stay badass, and make good choices. You being here means the world to me, and I'll see you next week, friend.